Welcome back, everybody, to Buckeye Bar Guys here on Buckeye Bar Talk. I'm Mike.
And I'm John.
And tonight's day is Friday, November 25th, 2022. And we are a day away from the kickoff between the number 3 Michigan Wolverines, 11-0, versus the Ohio State Buckeyes, number 2, 11-0, in Columbus. So huge game coming up. We're pretty excited. We got the Nebraska game going on here in the background, and they are really starting to roll it up on Iowa. They're up now 16-0 as they just scored, awaiting the extra point. So Iowa might be kicked out of the Big Ten championship game here. And as the
how they played last year, they don't deserve to be in the Big Ten title game this year.
The craziness of the West is going to be coming down to a photo finish.
Never ceases to amaze you. As I said, I think I said the words even at the beginning of this year, like the season preview we did. No one in the West wants to be extraordinary. They all just want to be middle of the pack. Like no one ever wants to separate themselves.
So I think how this goes, what is Purdue? So if Iowa loses, Purdue's in the driver's seat. But if they lose, Illinois is in the driver's seat. What happens if all 3 lose? Like, it goes back to Iowa?
I think it goes back to Iowa then. I think they're the only 3 mathematically that have a chance at this point.
Okay.
I think everyone else is eliminated besides those 3. I could be wrong because it's the freaking Big Ten West. So whoever knows. But I think that's how it would play out.
I just know for sure there's no way in hell
at that point
can get in.
At that point, don't you just make your own rules if you're the Big Ten? I mean, Indiana with fans would say the Big Ten's done that before for a Big Ten title game. And don't you just make the game play 2 weeks in a row?
Give a second week of Ohio State, Michigan. I mean,
it'd be a better game, probably.
Yeah. All righty. Excuse me. Let's get into our thoughts for this week. So, obviously with this game, you got a lot of history behind this game. As individuals who've been pretty much following Ohio State pretty closely since, the mid 90s. I mean, there's a lot of, Buckeye games that we can draw back from. I mean, obviously even further back, there's even more, back to, our parents' eras and, farther back even to our grandparents' eras that, some unbelievable games have been played in this series. So, it's a hell of a matchup. The kind of some of the games I think of years past. I mean, obviously, when you think about tomorrow's game, first game to really think of is the 2006 game because, same situation. The winner was going to the national championship game. They didn't have a Big Ten title. So the winner was going to the national championship game. And, the loser possibly was, we would see in a few weeks. After that, obviously, Michigan, who lost, didn't make it. But I mean, what a hell of a game that ended up being, 42-39 in Columbus. I mean, and it was undefeated. They were number 1 versus number 2. So, I mean, just a lot of parallels with that game, you feel into this game.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. 110% that this does feel a lot like 2006. I'm wondering if it'll turn out like 2006, where it kind of felt like Ohio State really handled them, but kind of took their foot off the gas, later on in that game. 16 was a top 5 matchup, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was the double overtime thriller. 18 was good. I don't remember how high Ohio State climbed back up.
I just know that we knocked them out of the playoffs.
Right. Yeah.
With that win, so yeah, a lot of big games there. Obviously, we pulled away from them in 18. And
then going back to 97, I believe that was a top 5 matchup. I think Ohio State had climbed back into the top 5 because their only loss that year was up to that point was Penn State, and was close. It was like a touchdown game.
Obviously, I mean, Michigan, not necessarily rank wise. I mean, the 0-2 game, I mean, you think about that game. I mean, what a slugfest that game was. And that was, you think about all the games, Michigan took away from them, previously. And, that was kind of the big fear for Buckeye fans going into that game was, Michigan, they've taken away so much from Ohio State in the mid 90s. Could Ohio State get through them to go on to the national championship, in which they did. And, obviously won the title. But I mean, that was another great game, low scoring game. We were there. I mean, just an unbelievable atmosphere. And you think about, you have still like 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and Michigan still gets two shots out of it, and they throw, you know, to Braylon Edwards in the end zone, where or almost in the end zone, where Will Allen picks it off at the last play of the game.
He was at John Navarre's the quarterback.
Yeah. So just talk about a crazy game that was. So yeah, tons of games. You think, you think about how dominant Ohio State has been over, since Jim Tressel took over as a coach, but there's still a lot of good football games in there. 2013 game, Tyvis Powell intercepts the 2-point conversion to hold that game, to win that game. So
2013, I get the home field advantage, but that team, like Michigan, sucked that year. Like, I can't believe they stayed in that game.
They did, but it was just a crazy, back and forth game. That one was.
It was.
The 05 game,
because that's when Hyde sets the record for rushing yards, right? Against them. Like, he has like 230 or something like that.
Yeah. You think about, and 2005, the Ohio State was definitely the favorites coming into the game, and some mishandles on the punts by Ted Ginn Jr., which was very uncommon for him, really kept Michigan in that game. They're winning, and then Troy Smith has a great fourth quarter, and they bring him back, score 2 touchdowns with like in 8 minutes to win that game.
Yeah, very true. So let's start this off. Let's actually talk about some of our favorite moments from just like games past also. So offensively, doesn't necessarily have to be a touchdown, but what is your favorite offensive play that you can recall? Let's say from when we've actually been watching. So 95 on, of course, if there is one that you've over the years that you think just deserves it, that's fine too.
But I think my favorite was, there's a couple that are definitely up there. Probably the one that's like, you think that's just like, just because I saw it right in front of my face, the Mo Hall touchdown.
Yeah.
That was just, again, they still had 8 minutes left in the game, but that was just a great touchdown. You think back to 06.
I said one. You can't take mine.
Well, it's just all right. You take yours, and then I'm going to talk about a few others because
mine. And I think this stuff changes all the time. I'm going to say Curtis Samuel's walk-off is going to be mine from 2016. I have a runner-up honorable mention as well. So you go ahead with yours.
I like the Curtis Samuel one's a good one. I like when you think about just how this kind of makes you think about a lot about tomorrow too. How vaunted Michigan's defense was coming into the game, especially their run defense, and Beanie Wells just like slices right through their heart in 02. If Pittman later or not 06 is that. And, Pittman later that, on 2 huge touchdown runs. And it was like they didn't know what the heck was going on in Michigan's defense. It was like they were hit by a freight train that they weren't expecting. They didn't think Ohio State was going to be able to run on them at all in that game. And they just torched them right up the middle on both those runs.
Never Say Die 2005 Gonzo. The catch at the end of that 2005 game to put them into scoring position for Antonio Pittman. I think it's overlooked. I don't know how it can be, probably because it didn't result in the touchdown itself, but that was just an amazing play from start to finish, from Troy keeping the play alive to throwing it where, and I don't remember the coverage around Gonzo, but you have to be like Superman jumping up out of the stadium to go catch it, or it sails behind you. And I don't remember if there's a safety back there or not.
He gets hit. Like, he goes up and he gets hit hard and he comes down hard. So, his feet were completely off the ground.
Yeah.
And then he got popped too.
But I'm saying it could have been an interception if there's someone else back there, if he doesn't just go up and go get it. Yeah. So it was just, it was an amazing play, from start to finish. Like I said, it resulted in the game-winning touchdown. If you've never seen the play, for anyone younger that hasn't checked it out, you should probably YouTube that because it was amazing. Obviously, the video quality isn't what it is nowadays, but it was such a great play. And it was like, and you kind of thought, like, okay, well, we won in 04. We shouldn't have won in 04. But 05, we had lost 03 in Ann Arbor. So, okay, this is going to go back every other year. Whoever's the home team is going to win the game. And it was just like, no, it was never say die. Troy wasn't going to lose to them, and him and Gonzo got it done.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was another great play. All right. So we'll move on. Let's start breaking this down for, the game for tomorrow. We'll go into kind of just the position breakdowns. Obviously, we'll start offensively, just who we think has the advantage on both sides. I would say, I'll start off with the quarterback. We just haven't seen enough. I mean, in my opinion, this year for JJ McCarthy to say that, they have the advantage at quarterback. So I would say it's CJ Stroud. And I don't think it's that close. I mean, I think if CJ Stroud plays his game and looks good, I mean, it's they definitely have the advantage there.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to agree with you. CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in this game. I don't think it is relatively close. I mean, it can't be. JJ McCarthy just hasn't done enough. I don't think I don't think Michigan's trusted him enough to make plays. They really haven't had to. So we'll see. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have the talent to do so. I think he does, but as of right now, you can only say CJ Stroud is the better quarterback. So that one has to go to Ohio State.
Yeah, I know. I definitely agree with that one. So I would say probably then, going to the running back side of it, honestly, I don't think we know anywhere where all the health is going.
Let's say healthy, just 100% they're healthy. Everyone's healthy.
In Michigan, they just put more emphasis on it. I think they have a slight advantage on it with running backs. So I'll give that to them.
Yeah, I just think their running backs have shown all year. And I know Ohio State's have been injured, but I just think that their Ohio State or Michigan's running backs and their offensive line have been in simpatico the whole season, that, and it hasn't always seemed that way with Ohio State. So I got to give an edge to Michigan on the running backs.
Yeah. When it comes to wide receivers, I would say Ohio State has the advantage. I mean,
I don't think it's close.
I mean, we've seen Ronnie Bell for them, but we haven't really seen much more from their other receivers and a lot of production this year. So they have Ronnie Bell. I don't know how much more they have after that. And Marv is a better. I mean, you could say Marv and Abuka.
Ronnie Bell. When you see the field at Ohio State, maybe as a third over Fleming every now and then, but
I would say it's definitely the top two wide receivers for sure belong to Ohio State.
Yeah. I don't think that's really necessarily that close. Offensive line, I do got to give an edge to Michigan on that. Again, it just seems like, as far as, what they're trying to do, they're all just in sync with each other. So I don't know if it's as big of a edge as what some people think it is going into the game, but I do give Michigan the edge on that.
Give them a slight edge. I mean, I do think they're better with the run blocking, but CJ's been incredibly untouched this year. So, I mean, pass blocking wise,
pass pro is great. Yeah.
You that, Ohio State might even be in front of theirs. I mean, I don't necessarily have, paid a super amount of attention to how well teams are able to attack McCarthy. But I mean, Stroud's been very clean this year. So I would say that, I would only give a slight edge to Michigan.
Yeah, I agree. Tight ends. Now this one I'm going to say, because we know Aircall's not playing because he's out for the season. I mean, at least last I checked. And I know their backup tight end, he was banged up too. We didn't really get an update on him. So I would give the tight end edge to Ohio State and Cade Stover. I think Cade does more. He's not just a pass catcher. But I think he can match up with anybody as a pass catcher.
Is the second tight end the one that's banged up? Is that freshman?
It's Luke Schoonmaker.
Okay, I don't. It seemed like
he'd been good.
The kid that they've
not the kid from last week, no, because the guy I'm talking about was out.
Yeah, they said that he's been, impressing them, over the last few weeks. He's been playing, so I mean, I think Stover probably has done a little bit more than him, so I'll agree with that. But I mean, I think that one again is probably a slight edge, and I think if Schoonover's back, it might even be a push.
Defensive line, slight edge to Ohio State.
Yeah, I agree with that one. I think I saw, I think we've seen different flashes from Michigan's defensive line. They're just not, they lost their two best players from last year, and they're good. I mean, don't get me wrong. And they definitely, if you get them and let them play a lot of third and longs, they will make you pay. They have a really good pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you can stay ahead of the chains against them, I think Ohio State does have. I think Ohio State's a better first and second down defensive line, and can get into those third and longs, a little bit more easier than Michigan. I think could happen. So I would agree that I think the slight edge goes to Ohio State's defensive line. I definitely like over the last few weeks. I think Sawyer and Tuamalo and Zach Harrison are all really coming on, and so Mike Hall's had some really impressive times when he's been in this year. Tyleik Williams, same thing, and so it's Ron Vincent's looking good at times. So it's like whoever can be that, if they can get another guy in there that really shows up, like with those three, if those three show up, and he should, I think they could. I think that could be where really the whole game is won. The Ohio State defensive line, because if they set the line to where Michigan can't really run the ball as easy on them, then they could be a longer day for Michigan. Not saying it won't be a hard game. It just I think Ohio State has a lot more outs than Michigan does.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Linebacker, I'd give a pretty decisive edge to Ohio State on on linebackers.
It's a crime that Tommy's not up for the Buckeyes award. I mean, what he's done this year, it's like, has anybody even watched the games?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just he's been phenomenal all over the field. I don't know if they felt like they could only give it to like one Big Ten invite or something. It was just really strange that, he wouldn't be a finalist for that. So I got to give Ohio State that edge. DBs, I think, is interesting. I would almost call it a push. I mean, I think in 50-50 balls on man coverage, I think Michigan's been a little bit more effective. I think our safeties are phenomenal. I'm not saying their safeties are bad or a weakness, but I would say it's a push. I wouldn't give it to one group over the other.
I think with the injuries, I think maybe that the corners, maybe Michigan's, I think there's the DBs as a whole. I would give it to Ohio State. I think, I think the DBs are close to a push, the corners, and maybe a slight edge to Michigan, just because you've had a lot of injuries with Ohio State. But I think I think Ohio State's safeties are better than their safeties, and so I'm not saying it's not as a blowout like what the linebackers are. But I don't think it's like a slight advantage. No, I think Ohio State safeties are better than them. So I might even say, as a secondary as a whole, Ohio State has a slight advantage.
Specialist, I would say slight edge to Michigan. Moody by a hair over Ruggles. Mirko's probably a hair over Michigan's punter. Yeah. Michigan's probably cleaner in the return games and the kickoffs and what Ohio State kickoff coverage in the return games and what Ohio State is. So give that to them. Head coach, I think that would probably be a push too, because I think Ryan Day's a more innovative head coach. I think Jim Harbaugh still comes from that old school, like not necessarily old school, but he's one from that generation of like, he's the team CEO, it's not necessarily like just, a master of one side of the ball. It's more of an identity of the team.
Yeah. I think I agree with that. I think if it gets into the type of game that Michigan wants to play like they did last year, I think Harbaugh's probably a slightly better head coach because, that's kind of his identity that, it's hard, tough fought wins. And, if they kind of get into a game like 2019 where, let's just say this, if there's a lot of scoring back and forth early in the game, like 18 and 19, then you got to love Ohio State's for that because, eventually you think Ohio State's defense will eventually shut them down. And, that advantage goes to Ohio State if they're moving the ball well. So I think if it gets into a game of wits and, who's a better mind coach and smart coach, it's probably slightly, towards Day. And if it gets into that, hard fought slugfest, it's probably a little bit closer to our hearts ball. So I'll agree with the push on that one.
Ohio State's got to play a clean game. Michigan's one of the least penalized teams out there. Ohio State gets a lot of penalties.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know relative to who's leading, but they've played some ugly games this year, and they can't afford to be able to do that.
No.
They got to play clean. They got to stay ahead of schedule. But most importantly, you can't kill drives with offensive line penalties. You can't have holdings. You can't have false starts. You got to keep it moving if you're going to try going tempo on these guys.
Yeah.
Very important.
Yeah. All right. So, going off of that, I definitely agree with you. I think, we've talked about this a lot, how this game's going to go. It's just Ohio State. It comes down to Michigan's running game and Ohio State's ability to stop the ball, to stop Michigan's running game.
Yeah.
If Michigan, establishes their will in the second half, they wore them down in the first half last year. And then, Ohio State did not, attack at all in the second half. They were tired. They were getting pushed around too much. And, that they wore them down. They didn't have the correct conditioning. They didn't have the correct strength training.
Well, I think they were out of sorts is what it was. I think they were poorly coached is more.
They were badly coached. They were in bad positions. So I think if Michigan can get to that template, could be a long game for Ohio State. I'm not saying, Ohio State at the end of the day last year, even with how bad they looked in the second half, they needed to make one stop, and then they kept on getting it back to within one score through the third quarter. And, and it's like, if they could have just got that one stop, they could have got back into the game, but, Michigan just never allowed them. And so I think if they can, I think that they just have to stay out of it. And, that I think they could, as long as they can shut down Michigan's running game, they should be fine in this game. But if Michigan can establish the running game and, and it gets to kind of being a longer day for Ohio State where Michigan's really in the game, then Ohio State just needs to find that stop to get back into advantage.
I'm interested to see how Ohio State, what they have to do to vary their defense, that they can stop the run, bottle up McCarthy in the pocket, but also change their looks on the back end to confuse him, to make him, pump fake it, to get sacked, or to make him throw an interception. Because as bad as some of his downfield passing's been, he hasn't been a very loose, mistake making quarterback. He hasn't. I think he's only thrown 2 picks on the year, only 14 touchdowns. So not a stat line to really write home about, but he still has done a good enough job not turning the ball over. Now I know he fumbles sometimes when he tries to extend plays, and you got to get one of those too, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm interested to see how the defense can do that. And on the other side, I'm interested to see how Michigan's defense attacks Ohio State. I think their only prayer is you go man up, you bracket Marv, you hope the other receivers can't make a difference, and you shut down the run game, and, you blitz Stroud, or you commit those extra bodies to kind of being in the box. And then you vary your looks from there, who you're going to drop back or not. If they go in zone and they dare Ohio State to run on them, I mean, Ryan Day's been stubborn in the past, but he's always acknowledged it, and he's always adjusted to it, and he's run down teams' throats when they've made him do that.
Yeah. It'll also be interesting if they try to go very heavy man against Ohio State, how quickly, because we saw against Illinois last week, they gave up some of those crossing routes that you kind of remember how the Don Brown days where they were kind of, those were a threat. And I think maybe if Illinois was a better passing team, they probably could have exploited that a lot more.
Yeah.
How quickly does Ryan Day, if that's what the goal is, try to go man, how quickly can he get those crossing routes into the out there onto the field? And, that's kind of the thing. If you just gotta kind of with Day, you just gotta be patient. Don't get frustrated, and see what they're throwing at you, and then you got the abilities to break both zones and man coverage. So
yeah,
find what they're doing and then just exploit it, until force them to change up on you. I would say with going back onto the McCarthy thing real quick. Yeah. I mean, he hasn't made a lot of mistakes, but I just think the biggest thing with that is that if you can shut down the running game, it's just make him think a little longer. I think that they could really, put 9 guys in the box and make him guess who's dropping out and who's staying and who's coming on a blitz and which defensive linemen are dropping back in coverage. And, that's really how they should try to run it. There should be guys from the safety level and, possibly one of them are coming and possibly one of them are dropping out. Make him guess there, make him guess with the linebackers who's coming and who's going, and make him guess with the defensive line. And, just put a lot of guys right in his face and, mix up the coverages and him and, and if that extra second could be a sack or it could be him throwing it into a bad lane. I mean, who knows? And, and that's when you start taking advantage of him, challenge him to make him actually make plays, take the running game for him and, force it onto his shoulders.
Now, personal development. And I don't know, maybe it being Jim Harbaugh, it doesn't shock you at all. But how shocked are you, though, that they created this scenario at the beginning of the season to pretty much take the ball away from Cade McNamara, give it to J.J. McCarthy, and they have leaned so heavily on the run game and don't want him to do anything for their team? Like, how much does that shock you that he is a talent? He's a 5-star quarterback that they took the time to recruit, made sure he ended up the starter, even though Cade had a really good year, and they don't haven't really taken any process to developing him whatsoever.
It's a big risk on their part because, they could be thinking about they could go back in with their normal game plan, which is probably what I think they will do. And, run the ball and just let him be a game manager. Or they might think that this is where they're going to trick Ohio State up and, open it up a little bit more. My problem with that is that they haven't really given him any opportunities this year to do it. And because of that, he could be great in practice with his wide receivers and stuff that we're not seeing. But, game time against a live I don't care if you're going against your ones all the time. I mean, that is one thing. I mean, we go against our ones a lot too. Other teams just throw other things at you, and you can't guess necessarily what, they're going to throw at you. And if you're getting in against a big time defensive coordinator like Knowles is, you got a lot of athletes on this side of the ball that Ohio State does. So yeah, if you think you're going to trick Ohio State that we're just going to start opening it up and they haven't seen this all year, well, you really haven't practiced it in any real live game opportunities neither. So I don't know. Are you going to be on as much as you are? You got to find that continuity with you and your receivers.
It's hard to flip a switch in a live game situation. So yeah, I mean, I was curious to see what you thought about that. And what else about the game?
Well, going off that,
injuries. Let's talk injuries.
Or just one point real quick.
Okay.
And then the injuries. And on the other side of it, the difference between, Day and Harbaugh, if they think that they are going to just try to flip a switch and go, well, Ohio State has done everything. They've tried to run the ball, they throw the ball, and stuff. So Day could almost come into he's in a position where he actually could be holding plays back, but the running backs have ran, the receivers have ran routes. I mean, everybody's got continuity with each other.
He has this live game data.
So he has the data. So he could be holding plays back where that could be an advantage to him because, it's not like you're trying to throw, something out there that people haven't seen all year. I mean, Ohio State's throwing a lot of things out there that a lot of people say they just might be changing up the plays a little bit here and there to, mix and match that a little bit more. Onto the injury side of it, the injuries are going to be the big thing. I think that, it'll be interesting. Is Corum healthy enough to play? I mean, you got to imagine that, that if Corum's not playing, I know Edwards could be back, but I didn't see a lot from their
outside those two
that, and I don't know if Edwards could run a whole game by himself. This could be the one thing where it really hurts them if one of these guys are out of this game, they don't have that Haskins like they did last year. That was, the big bruiser back that, I mean, Corum had an okay game against the Buckeyes last year, but Haskins is the one that killed them. So,
well, it doesn't matter who would have ran that ball last year. that was a pathetic showing. What if Corum's even if he can play, what if he's not, and he's not going to be 100%, but where's the point where he's a liability to the team being out there that they're going to try to force feed him and he doesn't have anything 80%?
Well, I mean, you kind of felt like that last week a little bit with the Buckeyes that Trey was just so banged up on his foot that he was kind of a liability out there against Maryland. And, they looked a lot better when Hayden was out there. So, yeah, it could be the same thing with Corum if he's not. But if he says he's ready to play, you have to kind of play him because
Yeah, you got to
you
give
got
him
to see that. You got to be able to see that on game footage, if he's okay or not okay. I mean, he could say that I'm fine and he's only 80% and he looks okay and he looks fine. He's not killing them. And then he could be, really because he can't maybe move side to side and do some of his normal stuff. And then that really starts affecting him.
it just with that. I mean, the hard spot that puts any coach in is how many times do I give him to knock the rust off or to show that he can, fight through the injury, overcome this? Like how many drives would Harbaugh let him be ineffective before he says, "Hey, Blake, you just don't have it today. We got to shut you down because we're not moving the ball with you."
The problem is if is Edwards there? Is he not there? Like, so they kind of have a weird thing too. Like,
Yeah.
Ohio State might have an advantage in this situation because you could try to run Maya and Trey, and if one of them aren't necessarily working, well, you might be able to get something still out of the other guy. It kind of seems like they both might be playing. Again, just reading some tea leaves and stuff. They've been practicing. It seems like. But you still have a fresh, healthy Hayden there that,
Yeah.
He's ready to go. And he's actually gotten significant play time at different points this year. So, he's in front of the Michigan running backs that are behind Edwards. So, I would say if the top four running backs in this game, if they are really kind of like pushed that they're not up to, speed to really play, Hayden really puts possibly Ohio State an advantage in this situation where he's had opportunities to run the ball. He's been running, he's got game reps. So like he could be a kind of a difference maker there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm interested to see what he does because I think he can have success running against these Wolverines. I know their defensive tackles are monsters and monsters in the run game, but if you can get any sort of tempo going against them, be successful, stay ahead of the chains and get those big bodies tired, that your offensive lineman could just lean on them. Hayden can explode in this game because where Trey, has had issues with the zone stretch, running that they do. Mayan's a little bit better, but he's still not great at it. Hayden actually kind of excels at that he finds a hole, he puts his foot in the ground and he goes.
I mean, yeah.
Or finds that cutback lane, And
that's kind of like I would have been thinking. Like, I almost would like to think if I was Ryan Day, how I'd almost play this if, as long as you're not like giving up turnovers and stuff like that I would almost like for the first half of the game, like I would do no substitutions and just go full tempo on everything. And maybe you play Hayden at that point.
Yeah.
And, and for the first half and just force Michigan to try to stop you on different things. And, you just come in with different plays and you run tempo at them. You try to and just keep on getting first downs and go down the field. And then maybe, that helps you get up by the few scores that you need. Because I really do think if Ohio State does get out in front by a few touchdowns, at that point, it's almost impossible for Michigan.
Puts a lot of pressure on them.
A lot of pressure for them. I mean, Ohio State would have to make a lot of mistakes at that point to really, get a threat that they're not going to win this game.
Okay.
All right. So let's go with our players of the game and all of our breakdown, or not position breakdowns, the, bold predictions and stuff like that.
Okay. Offensive player of the game. I'm gonna say Cade Stover. I think he has a real big role in this game. I think Marv is going to get double teamed. There's going to be press man with a safety over top of him. That's not saying Marv's not going to get his at different points, but I think Cade's going to really be the type of guy that's going to soften this team up in the middle because it's not going to necessarily be there, all the time for Marv or Emeka. But I think Cade's going to eat in the middle of the field. And Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson, they just have a knack in these big games when there's pressure situations. They really know how to use the tight end. Maybe it's because they don't make them the focal point that often, but they know how to do a lot of misdirection stuff and come back to the tight ends. Yeah. It's usually successful.
I think my player of the game is going to be Marv. you're right. They're going to double him. They're going to try to bracket him with the safety. But Penn State did that, and what did he do? He beat the corner off the line of scrimmage, and they ran slants against it the whole time. And yes, the safety was in position to tackle him pretty much where he was, but that was like 10, 15 yards.
Yeah,
and so I think that they'll just kind of go back to that, and he'll use his athleticism to beat the corner off the line of scrimmage, and yeah, the safety will be there to make a play, but the ball's going to get to him, and then the safety's just going to tackle him, but it's still going to be first downs pretty much every time at that point. So yeah, I think it'll be Marv. I think he's going to have a big game. He's going to have 100+ yards receiving. I think he's going to have a couple touchdowns. He is probably outside of. Well, he probably is the best player on the field. I mean, obviously,
yeah,
everything goes to the quarterbacks. They're the guys. CJ Stroud's still going to get drafted higher than him if they were going in the same draft, but that he is probably the best athlete, the best player. I mean, the best skill set. I mean, everything on the team. I mean, and I think he'll prove it.
We're gonna bring back the kind of surprising superstar, whatever you want to call it, just the guy that kind of just comes out of nowhere, or you weren't expecting him to have a great game, but he does. I think Xavier Johnson has a role in this team that could be very similar to what we had seen them do with like JSN last year, just especially in the Rose Bowl, where they had motioned him to like the backfield, to get him into advantageous matchups. So I could really see that happening. I think Marv's going to get a lot of attention. Like I said, I think Emeka's going to get a lot of attention. And I think, there's going to be times that, Julian's going to come out. Xavier's going to come in. He can catch out of the backfield. He's very versatile. We saw him on kickoff returns. He has pretty good vision in front of him. We saw him on that touchdown against Indiana. He had 71 yards. He has good vision. So yeah, I think that he's a guy that I really think they could use. Maybe not get touchdowns, but extend drives, big gains, chunk yardage.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I like that. I think that, my pick will be Hayden. I think he's just going to be kind of it's going to be like a weird, he's not necessarily is he the player of the game, no, but I just think he's going to be kind of that difference maker. I could see him have some big runs and, establish himself.
What number yardage does he need for Ohio State for sure victory in your mind?
For sure victory, I think Ohio State needs to run the ball for 200 yards, but I think if he can get to 100+ and they can find that other 100 to 75 yards between a mixture of the other running backs and Stroud, then, they're on, and possibly the receivers and different things. I think they're, right in target there for a 200-yard game.
That has to be, to me, that has to be a guaranteed win.
Yeah, I would think that is. And I think they could do it. It might take an entire committee, and, with Hayden possibly being kind of the bellwether to get you to at least the century mark.
Okay. Bold prediction. I'm gonna say Julian Fleming has 2 touchdowns in this game, 1 for over 40 yards.
Okay. I think that they're going to do something they haven't really done a lot this year, and that's screens to the running backs. They've done a few, but they have not. I think they're going to get Michigan they're going to force them into an aggressive motion, try to be aggressive against Stroud. Michigan's going to try to come in aggressive. I can see this in the first half, and you're going to get a guy like Hayden out there. And
I hope so.
And, you'll see his speed for what it is. And, and they will use Michigan's aggressiveness against them on something like that. So I see a big screen touchdown for Dallin Hayden in this game.
Okay. I like that. Defensive player of the game. I think I just am the benefactor of going first here. I'm gonna say Tommy Eichenberg. I think he'll be all over the field. Michigan is going to try to run. I think he'll do a great job stopping it. There's a lot of places you can go with that. That's why I had that. I started hesitating there because Eichenberg's been the guy in my mind, but I guess there's other guys that, definitely could step up to do it. But I see Tommy being that guy.
I think they're going to play a lot of. I mean, we've talked about, will they try to play maybe a 5-man front, try to get to the Bear defense and stuff. I think they're going to try some of that stuff. I think they're going to run, some. I can see them running with 3 linebackers out there and 4 linemen, but Sawyer or JTT up and kind of playing Cody Simon close to the line of scrimmage too, and kind of have 2 ends coming up but standing up on them. And then you take in all the gaps away in the middle and you have 2 linebackers behind those guys. And I could see them doing some of that stuff. And we've seen some scatterments of that type of stuff this year. And I'm wondering if it was trying to run it out there just to kind of work on it a little bit because they had plans to use it later. This would be the game to use it against. I definitely see them throwing a lot of guys up on the line of scrimmage. They're really in that linebacker area just to kind of, shut that down. So where I'm thinking that they are really going to go is to really shut them down. So I like the Eichenberg call. I'm gonna say Sawyer. I really liked him the last few weeks.
He's been really coming on.
I think they're gonna do different things like that where they're gonna get him standing up and maybe having another guy, maybe a linebacker standing up on the other side of him. And then you kind of pick your poison, and they're going to do a lot of different stunts. They're going to be trying to take the gaps away. And so that's kind of where I'm thinking. I think it's going to be Sawyer. I can see Zach Harrison. I can see JTT. I can see Eichenberg. I think that the point of this game is that portion of the field, they don't want to be the losers this year.
No, absolutely not.
They're all coming into it with a lot of pride that, Michigan is not going to do what they did to them last year.
They got to play in control, though. You have to contain McCarthy. You can't run too far upfield and just screw yourselves because he can get outside your tackle box then.
Unless you force him to one side of the field and try to force him to his wrong side, which is the left, which he's not that good at.
Yeah, I think he's like a sub 30% passer.
I've said if you could try to force him to his left and then kind of keep Eichenberg or Steele as a spy, and as he's coming back towards the left, then bring them on a blitz that kind of force him to try to either throw up or take a sack.
Yeah.
I could see that. And there's going to be a lot of things from Knowles that, it's going to be a chess match in there. And I think he really relishes that. And he definitely seems like he's on a different level this week in his preparation mode. He's really relishing the moment that he has an opportunity that he gets to really tweak a lot of different things for this game.
Surprise player for me that's going to make an impact. I'm going to throw out 2 names here. It's kind of the same position, almost not really, but it kind of is where their alignment's going to be. It's really going to be depending on what Jim Knowles what he wants to do with the bigger body. Because I don't think Tanner McAllister is going to be the guy you want to keep throwing out there in this game. I could be wrong. He could just be giving different looks with different personnel, but I think this game is going to be very heavy on either Proctor or Cody Simon, depending on how athletic he wants that guy to be. Because Joshua Proctor, he's actually a good fit for this type of thing because he is a hitter as a safety. So he might be a little undersized when you compare him to Cody Simon, but he makes up for a lot of it with his aggression. And I think he would be a better coverage guy. I don't think Cody's terrible, probably not the best, but I know Cody is he's a great linebacker. Yeah. So I think one of those guys are really going to step up because they're going to get the opportunity.
It's funny because I'm kind of in the same spot as you are. I was thinking probably the same thing. I think they're both going to play a lot because I think that Cody Simon is going to be in there very early in the early downs, that he's the guy that's going to try to get Michigan behind their chains. And, he's if they're only giving up 2 yards a run, 3 yards a run, that's in a good spot for Ohio State, on first down. If Michigan, I think the goal is to hold Michigan to a lot of 3rd and 5s. And then you're going to see Proctor in on 3rd down that is taking away those easy throws to the middle of the field. And if they're going to try to throw one to Donovan Edwards or whoever, Proctor's got to be the guy that's going to come up and lay the lick on him. And, and that's going to be kind of, I think, that thing. So, yeah, I kind of see the same thing, too. I was leaning on Proctor to be in my kind of surprised because I think he's going to have a big game. He's going to have a lot of third down stops. I think that is, which is going to be big. If Michigan can't get first downs, Michigan can't win this game.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously that sounds like, well, that's obvious, but no, they got first downs at will last year. If they're not doing that, there's almost like Ohio State would have to be as equally as bad on offense to, for them to be able to, possibly win this game.
Well, hopefully they get them to third downs this year.
Yeah. If Ohio State's scoring or moving the ball fine on offensively and Ohio State is getting Michigan off the field this year, then at that point, it's near impossible. I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's going to be very hard for Michigan to win the game.
Yeah. Defensive bold prediction. So this is actually going to be just as a position group. I believe the safeties from Ohio State will have 4 turnovers recovered. So that could be any combination of interceptions and fumble recoveries, but I believe that they are going to get the ball 4 times from Michigan. The safeties will.
I'm going to say I know that he can escape. He's got some legs and stuff like that. I think the defensive line is going to put so much pressure on him. I don't know what that equates to: sacks, knockdowns, pressures, but that whole they are going to take this game over. And I don't know necessarily how to say what number they're going to get 5 sacks or something. I think they're going to get near double digits pressures to the point that JJ is they're going to get into his head eventually. And I think they're going to, at that point, that will force turnovers. That's going to do a lot of things.
That's what I'm banking on.
And I just think that they are going to take this game over as the game goes through, as it's going. This game, they're going to establish themselves that they are the better defensive line. They have the better players. They have the better athletes. They have the better defensive line coaching. They have the better defensive coordinator. And I think that they will win that's when they establish themselves, that defensive line. And again, that's going to put just intense pressure on Michigan to the point that I don't know if they can overcome that.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, like the caveat to all this, and I think you've already said that, is if Michigan does what they did last year and they just collapse on those tackles all day long and just run, down Ohio State's throat, they're going to win the game.
Yeah.
They'll win it again. So, I mean, Ohio State, with all this being said, it still comes down to, is your defensive line going to be in position that they can take on these blocks, stand up to this offensive line, so then your linebackers can clean everything up? And I think that they're going to be in much better position this year.
The coaching part of it will be there. So they'll be in the right spots. They're going to have the right game plan in place. They'll have a guy that has the ability to make adjustments. So it comes down to, are they conditioned enough to do it? Was the strength training good enough this year to do it? Do the players want to do it? And so that's where it comes down to. And I think they, I think the one thing that's another advantage real quick, that all these questions that they've been getting this week about, the toughness stuff, that's all coming up again. And they were annoyed about that last year. I mean, they were fair questions, but, I think it's the point is, it's time to prove them wrong. And, you don't hear a lot of the background chirping from at least the Michigan. You hear from their fans. You don't hear from the Michigan that's possibly coming out from the Michigan beat reporters that obviously was coming from the Michigan staff that where we think Ohio State is weak or,
finesse.
They're too soft in different spots. We were hearing that from beat reporters last year. So that was obviously coming from somewhere that, they were being told off the record that, different things. And we're not hearing that this year. So I think
Nebraska just forced the fumble on the punt.
So, yeah, I just don't think that it seems like Michigan, I think, thinks that this is going to be a much more game than what they thought last year.
Yeah. And it was last year also, or like not last year also, but, Harbaugh, he didn't own his comments about the third, Ryan Day was born on third base. Like, I'm interested to see how it all plays out. I'm sure they'll both be better men, whoever wins, but I'm really interested to see what the post-game presser looks like. Either way, whoever wins this game. Okay. What is there anything else? Like,
no, I think we hit everything. let's get into the spreads, so the different games, and let's throw out our score predictions, and we'll get on out of here.
Another week of bad Big Ten football.
Some game, and there has been games. There is a lot of games going on today, so we're probably going to focus more on just the games for tomorrow.
Yeah,
Nebraska is currently up 17-0 on Iowa.
I'm driving again. Okay, so Rutgers, Maryland. It's in Maryland, 12 o'clock. Maryland's a 14-point favorite. I don't know what to make of this. I guess it depends to me if Talia is healthy or not.
Yeah.
I mean, he went down hard with Harrison. So I'm going to say Rutgers. I mean, this is a rivalry game, right? So I think I'll give Maryland the win at home, but I think Rutgers they'll be able to keep it within 14 points.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that Rutgers will, hold them below 14. So, but Maryland will win. So I should say it is kind of a weird caveat. I think if Tua plays and they look like they did last week, then they will actually easily score 14 plus. But so that's kind of a weird one. So right now I'm going to go with Rutgers on, with the cover.
Illinois plays Northwestern. It's in Evanston, Illinois. It's at 3:30. Illinois is a 14.5-point favorite. I mean, if this game right now holds pat, I think Illinois is going to absolutely just destroy Northwestern tomorrow, because I mean, they're going to be playing the same time as Purdue, and that's to get to the Big Ten title game at that point. So I think they're going to they're going to run it up on Northwestern.
I think Illinois is going to win the Big Ten West, so they're gonna win. They're gonna cover.
I don't know about that, man.
Indiana's going to upset Purdue. So let's go next one.
Indiana, Purdue. Then Purdue is a 10.5-point favorite. It's in Bloomington, so they are on the road. I mean, to be honest, I'm not sure I've watched a single down of Purdue football this year. Maybe the Penn State opened up against them, right?
Yeah.
So that was the only time I even watched a little bit of it. So I don't know much about Purdue, but I know they're better than Indiana. So I think they're going to win. I think they're going to cover on the road.
Big Ten East is superior than the Big Ten West. So
this I know as well.
Indiana will beat Purdue, and Illinois will be in the Big Ten championship game, because Nebraska just scored again. So
I was dead. Iowa's offense is worse this year than it was last year. So they got no prayer now. There is no way they're coming back. So Illinois is winning it, huh? All right. Minnesota 3:30 goes over to Camp Randall. Wisconsin is a 3-point favorite. It's a tough one.
I think Wisconsin playing a little bit better. I think they cover, and
Minnesota still played okay this year.
I don't know who has the axe right now, but it's with Wisconsin, and they'll win.
Okay. Penn State at home at 4 o'clock against Michigan State. Penn State's a 19-point favorite. I think they cover that.
I think they cover that too. Penn State's actually proven themselves. I've actually been quite impressed with Penn State. We've talked about this before, that they've kind of went downhill at different points once the Ohio State loss happened, that, they put out all their emotions and the physicality of that game on the field, and then they kind of dropped the next week.
Yeah.
But they am very impressed with how they're looking. And I think, they'll win tomorrow, they'll cover, and they'll probably secure themselves a New Year's Six Bowl game.
Yeah, they've rose to the occasion. I mean, props to them. Okay, let's go around the country. So, I mean, there's not a ton of great games. Clemson, of course, is playing South Carolina. It's in Death Valley. It's a 12 o'clock game. Clemson's a 14.5-point favorite. I totally see Spencer Rattler having a comeback to earth game after beating Tennessee like that. So I think Clemson will cover this. What about you?
I'm still not impressed with Clemson's offense enough. I don't know. I'll say they'll cover, but there is part of me that kind of wants to take South Carolina to, hold them below 14. And there's even a little part of me that thinks, South Carolina, I was pretty impressed last week. And, I was really impressed with that running back. And I don't know, South Carolina could beat them, but I'll say Clemson covers. I think that they'll cover. It'll be interesting now how they do with the ACC title game, because, they need to win out to even have a, prayer getting in. And, the committee's not been looking favorably on them.
No. Alabama Iron Bowl against Auburn. It's in Tuscaloosa this year. Alabama's a 22-point favorite. If it was on the road, I would say that, I think Auburn could beat the spread, not necessarily win the game, but Auburn's bad. Alabama is good, but they're just finding themselves this year. But I do think that they can win by 22 or more.
Yeah, I think Alabama covers. I actually think they will handle them fairly well. I've not been impressed with Auburn at all this year, so I'll say. But part of me is not. I don't like the fact that I know Alabama has barely lost the games that they've lost, but I don't like the fact that Penn State lost to Michigan and Ohio State, and they both have 2 losses, and Penn State crushed Auburn. So Alabama better crush Auburn, because I think, I don't like the fact that Alabama is getting a lot of love where Penn State should be getting a little bit more love. I mean, Penn State should be in the top 10.
All right. Oregon goes, of course, Oregon State. 3:30 game. Oregon is a 3-point favorite. They're 9-2, ranked 9th. Oregon State's 8-3, ranked 21st. They're pretty good. What do you think about the Beavers pulling the upset in this game?
Yeah, it might be a closer game than a lot of people think. What's the spread again?
No, it's only 3. Oregon's a 3-point favorite.
I think Oregon, they cover, and I think they win. But I think it'll be a tougher game than a lot of people think. But I do think it'll probably be like a 7 to 10 point win.
Okay. It's acting up again. Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. Okay, so, and I'm just throwing this one out there because they're still one of the undefeateds. TCU hosts Iowa State, 4 o'clock. TCU's a 10-point favorite. Tell me this is not going to be the Matt Campbell special again, and he's going to be that guy.
He always has one every year, so this could be it. But no, TCU is going to cover. They'll beat them. But it could be a tough first half, because it always seems like a tough first half for TCU.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, well, let's skip to USC is home against Notre Dame at 7:30. USC is a 4.5-point favorite. Give me the Irish, man. I think USC does have a very dynamic offense, and they are starting to click. I still am not sold on their defense, though, and I like what Marcus Freeman can do.
They're starting to play better. They're starting to get an identity with them as the coach.
On the road, though, that is tough going all the way out to California and winning that.
I think that USC wins by like 7.
Okay, so you think they cover?
They cover. So I will say USC wins.
They get to the playoffs. I mean, how dangerous are they with that offense?
They're dangerous, but they're going to be playing for sure 2 better defensive teams than them. And I don't think that they'll be able to beat Georgia or Ohio State / Michigan. I think that they're very dynamic on offense, but it kind of feels like Lincoln in the Big 12. It's like, he gets in there with those big time offenses, and eventually, now when you get into that level of football, some of these schools have real defenses and know how to slow that style of offense down just enough. Then Georgia plays prolific offenses. Ohio State plays a few prolific offenses, so they have to play against teams that they have to have field real defenses, and that always was the Big 12's issue in those games, and a couple times that the Pac-12 was in it, that was their issues too. When you think back to Oregon and to Washington, that when they made the playoffs, that they didn't have the defenses enough to play with those teams, and that's the issue.
Oregon won a game.
They did, but that Florida State team was not the same Florida State team from the year before.
No,
they would not have beaten Alabama. They were never going to beat Alabama or Ohio State. That was pretty much the de facto national championship game, and I know a lot of people said, well, Oregon, they got this like crazy. I think a lot of people deep down felt like that.
Yeah.
They didn't have a chance against either one of those teams.
Yeah. It's always funny when, oh my gosh, who was the middle linebacker from the early 2000s with Bobby and AJ Hawk?
Schlegel.
Yeah, it's always funny to hear when he recaps like what it was like, because he was, of course, on the strength and conditioning team for that national title run. And he was like, you play Alabama and these are just like, they're big like us, but they're monsters. Like they can't turn their necks. Like they're just so built. And then the next week you play a team that looks like high schoolers coming off the bus. It's like, you're like, oh, we're too fast. We're going to beat these guys. And then the next week it's like, well, these guys aren't even half our size. We're going to beat these guys. Yeah. So yeah, it must have been an interesting sight and feeling to have. All right. Well, that brings us to the game, Michigan, Ohio State, 12 o'clock noon in the Horseshoe. Ohio State is an 8-point favorite. Weather, last I've heard, weather is supposed to be pretty nice. So this is where I'm at for this game. They're both really good.
Yeah.
Michigan does, I think, one thing a little bit better than Ohio State, but Ohio State's comparable. I think Ohio State does another thing on offense that's a lot better than what Michigan does. I don't think you can give either defense. You really can't say this defense is better, this defense is worse, really in any category, because they play the same garbage offenses that the other one plays. So I don't think Ohio State giving up, 200 rushing yards to Northwestern on 60 rushes is that big of a deal.
Yeah.
So I don't see last year happening again. I just can't. Ohio State's better coached. These guys have more experience. They have pride. Yeah. They're not. Tommy Eichenberg isn't going to, get manhandled again like he did last year. So I've had this number all week, and I've listened to a lot of different beat writers, media people, and I don't know if I'm doubting it now because of what they think they might not be able to do, but I have Ohio State 42, Michigan 31. I have it a cover. I have it a very close game, like 35-31 up until like the 5 to 8 minute mark, maybe of the fourth quarter, maybe even a little bit closer to 0. But that's where I have it, and Ohio State somehow scores a final touchdown to just seal it.
Yeah.
So I have a cover for Ohio State.
I think the difference for me this year is I feel like Ohio State will play better defense, but Michigan is still they're gonna get their yard. They're gonna be able to run the ball some on Ohio State. They're gonna be able to establish some stuff, but it's gonna be a lot harder. I think they both are gonna draw. I think there is gonna be some bend to break on both defenses, and that they're both gonna move the ball at different spots. It's gonna kind of feel like at will in between the 20s. I think Ohio State, last year, it felt like it feels like they're much better this year. And we talked about the stats the other day that they're much better this year at scoring touchdowns once they get into the red zone than they were last year. I think that they're much better at stopping teams this year and holding to field goals when those opportunities have come up.
Yeah.
So I've
Michigan does struggle scoring in the red zone touchdowns.
So my feeling, it's going to be 31-16. I think, Michigan will get down there about 4 or 5 times. And I think that they will, but they're going to get the kick field goals. Moody will get his field goals.
Yeah.
But I think Ohio State will score touchdowns, and that will be the difference in the game. So I'm saying 31-16.
All right. So if Ohio State wins, we take shots of bourbon when Ohio State wins, or any type of liquor, really. But we stick with bourbon usually. Yeah. What are we going to drink if Ohio State wins this game?
We're going with the Eagle Rare. We haven't done it this year, so we'll take part. That's what we'll be partaking in, Eagle Rare.
Okay. So Ohio State, don't let us down. We haven't drank any Eagle Rare yet this season, so we would really like to have some. With that all being said, I don't have anything else to talk about. It's just now it's time to play.
Kickoff time.
So, go Buckeyes.
Go Buckeyes.
Avenge what happened last year. Of course, I didn't bring this up during the thing. Ohio State in the last 20 years or whatever it is, they are 19-0 against Big Ten teams that beat them the year before. Yeah. The Buckeyes don't usually drop 2 in a row. The last time that it happened was 03-04 Wisconsin. So, history's on their side. It's at home. Home team usually does win, especially when it's a top 5 matchup against each other. whatever happens, happens. Just go out, kick their ass. Go Buckeyes.
Go Buckeyes.
Thank you everyone for stopping out tonight to the Buckeye Bar. I'm John.
I'm Mike.
OH.
IO.